Coveros, we recognize that learning is a journey, not a destination. A trusted resource for organizations of all sizes, our companies have trained more than 30,000 software professionals, helping them on the road to what is next. With our live virtual learning platform, you and your team attend professional training courses right from your computer. Easy and quick access fits today's working style and eliminates expensive travel and long days away from current projects. We have a variety of tools built into the learning platform to engage learners through dynamic delivery and to facilitate a multi-directional flow of information. Our engineers and expert instructors share their real-world experience along with practical exercises to deliver an interactive online learning experience. Participants communicate in real time with the instructor, asking questions, providing comments, and engaging in class discussions. Access our most requested courses in topics like Agile, DevOps and cloud skills, software testing and test automation, internationally recognized certifications, and more. With a private live virtual class, your team gains flexibility in scheduling and class length. Course customizations and follow-on coaching can also be added, creating a learning experience that immediately applies new skills in existing projects. At Coveros, we deliver quality online training and virtual coaching that meets your budget, program schedules, and business goals. See more and get started today at coveros.com/learn.
Welcome everyone. My name is Alexa and I'll be your host today. Thanks for joining us for Netflix DevOps Leadership with Andy Glover and Jeff Payne. First, I would like to go over some features in Adobe Connect that you can use during today's web seminar. If you have not done so already, you can download a copy of the seminar materials and other resources from the resources section on the right side of your screen. All comments posted in chat are visible to everyone by default. However, if you experience any sort of technical difficulty and need assistance, please send me a private chat message. To do so, in the upper right-hand corner of the chat panel, select Start Chat With, and then my name, Alexa Angel. Enter your message and I'll help you immediately. You can also use the Set Status menu located next to the main menu navigation at the top of your screen to show agreement, ask the speaker to speak louder, or share some applause.
Welcome everyone. My name is Jeff Payne from Coveros. I'm the host and moderator for the Coveros webinar series. Today, our topic is Netflix DevOps Secrets. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the CEO and founder of Coveros. I've been building and testing software for about 30 years. For the last 12, have been focused on helping organizations accelerate their software delivery. We help organizations transition to better modern agile DevOps practices, integrate test and security into those practices, and we do that through training, coaching, and hands-on implementation. I'm also the technical editor for Agile Connection, which is an online community of software professionals interested in Agile and DevOps. It is a free community, so if you're interested in staying up with what's going on in the Agile and DevOps world, feel free to jump on to agileconnection.com and sign up. I'm really happy to introduce my special guest today. He is a good friend, longtime friend, and an expert, I will say, on CI/CD and leadership of DevOps. And Andy, you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hi.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff. Indeed, we have been friends for a very long time.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
Yeah, so my name's Andy Glover. I run productivity engineering at Netflix, and I'm on the West Coast in the Bay Area, and I'm elated to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Andy's going to relay a little bit more about his leadership journey in a bit. But before we do that, we want to see who's out there on this podcast. We had almost 500 people sign up for this podcast. So obviously, DevOps leadership and leadership in general are topics that you all are interested in, but we're curious to learn a little bit more about who you are and what your role is in the organization. So I'm going to start a poll, and please pick the role that best fits what you do. If you don't see your role there, just select other and then just put in the chat what your role is or how you would define your role. And we'll see who we have on the line with us today. I'll give you a few minutes to pick the one that best matches your role. Okay, I'm going to broadcast the results here, and we can see what we've got. Looks like we have a wide range of folks, really kind of split between test, dev, and management / scrum mastership, with a bunch of other roles in here as well. Interestingly, only it looks like about 6% are DevOps related or feel they are a DevOps professional, which is interesting. I don't know what you think about that, Andy, but it does look like we definitely have a cross section of different types of people on the call today, which is good, right, for DevOps, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about what we're going to talk about here today. So Andy's going to start off by giving us a little bit about his leadership journey. How did he get started, and where did he come from, and how did he get to where he's at, and he'll share a few lessons learned there, but then he's going to drill into some specific lessons learned that he finds to be essential, and talk a lot about Netflix and how Netflix views leadership. So why don't you take it from here, Andy, and take it away.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, so again, my name is Andy Glover. I do work at Netflix. I will share with you some lessons I've learned along the way to get here, but I do want to make it clear that I'm still learning. I don't have all the answers, and I look forward to hearing from you all, your thoughts on this. But I started my career at IBM in 1997 as a software developer. And I did that for a few years and then left to do the startup thing. Whoops, wrong direction. Here we go. And leaving IBM was tough, but going to a startup was obviously, very exciting in the sense of I knew I'd be given incredible responsibilities and leeway to grow. And something that stuck in my mind, I remember my first day at a particular startup called netwhistle.com. And I showed up, I was all excited, I was young, ready to just conquer the world. And I was given a sizable box and told that that was my chair and that I should start to put it together because after I finished building my chair, I had to go find a desk. And so I built the chair, and then I had to look around, and I found a rectangular community center style table, set it up, and then I had to go grab a number of other sizable boxes which contained my desktop computer and my monitor and whatnot. And coming from IBM, I was a little taken aback. It was shocking that I had to do all this myself. And I had this feeling that the startup didn't even expect that I was showing up. It was just kind of an afterthought that I showed up, and they were like, hey, go ahead and get ready. And it was kind of jarring. But, I got to tell you that life at a startup was an absolute blast. I loved it. I was indeed given unprecedented responsibilities, mostly because there weren't other people to do those various tasks that needed to be done if we were to succeed as a company. And I think this was very indicative of life at any startup in any point in time, that you have to figure stuff out. People have to work together to work together to figure new things out and stretch and grow, because if you don't do that personally, no one else will, and ultimately the company may not make it. And while I didn't know it at the time, this was a great life lesson, and that is you are in charge of your own destiny. And this is not even a leadership lesson. This is just a life lesson, and I give it to you for free because this will come up time and time again through your careers, but also through this presentation. So sadly, the dot-com boom came to an end, but as they say, for every door that closes, a window opens, and I had the opportunity to start my own company. And I was about as clueless as you could be, but somehow I managed to convince some of my recently laid off colleagues to join me. And I was also painfully aware that I was pretty young, very inexperienced, and couldn't possibly be taken seriously as the CEO of a company. So I took the title of CTO, and in presentations, basically selling to other companies, I would pretend that there was a CEO that ran the company, and I would make vague references to this individual. And it worked for a long time, but eventually I realized I actually had to hire a senior person to show up at some of these meetings and help convey that this company wasn't run by a bunch of children. And so I hired a CEO, but sadly things didn't work out, and I had to let him go about a year later. And it was 100% my fault. I didn't know it at the time, but this lesson has resurfaced throughout my career. And that is, if someone you hire doesn't work out, it's almost certainly your fault. It's either that they shouldn't have been hired because they couldn't have done the job, or you failed to help make them successful. And so that's another life lesson. And it'll also be important as I go over some of these DevOps leadership lessons. So I sold my company. I stayed on for a bit on the new company, and then I left that, and I did the startup thing for a couple more years. And then about actually more than 6 years ago now, so about 6.5 years ago, I joined Netflix. And along the way, I have learned a ton of lessons. And honestly, most of those lessons are learned from mistakes that I've made or had the fortune of watching others make. So I'd like to share with you 3 leadership lessons.
Hey, Andy, question for you.
Yeah.
On your journey before you get into those lessons. Mentors. So, I mean, obviously, when you start your own company, it's kind of on the job training, right? You mentioned, not feeling like you were a CEO. I used to have a fake employee at my first company that we used to call and complain about things to customers or whatnot because we didn't want the customers to get mad at the few of us that existed. You do crazy things like that. But did you have people either at your startups or maybe investors or people that you worked with who you feel like, taught you some things, mentored you, or do you feel like, through, your career, it's really been on the job, just learning, sometimes the hard way, sometimes the easy way, just figuring it out? What advice can you give to, the audience about mentors?
Well, so
Right?
I did have mentors, although at the time I called them mentors, but I very much went out and and sought advice from various entrepreneurs, people in the area. In fact, that's how I met you, Jeff, because you also at that point were or had been a successful CEO of a company. And so I remember meeting you and learning a lot from you. And so
Sweetwater Tavern, actually, is where I think we had lunch.
Exactly,
A
yes.
long time ago. Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of figure it out on your own, and I probably made more mistakes than I should have. But I think going out and meeting people and looking for people that have gone through this and asking advice. Some people find it very hard, but it's just a matter of networking, getting out there, and like I said, meeting you was I can't remember exactly how we got connected, but just connections like that,
Not
sitting
remember.
down with someone successful, asking them questions, picking their brain, and just kind of keeping a relationship, and you pick up tidbits through those type of interactions.
Yeah, you do. And I think one thing that the audience, I'm sure you would agree with, is you need to trust your gut too, right? I mean, a lot of times you mentioned you didn't want to call yourself CEO. I didn't want to either. I went by president for years and years because I just thought the C title sounded just too, I don't know, too much better, too much more than what I thought I was, right?
Yeah.
But what you learn though is that you have a pretty good gut feel after being in business for a while. And I always encourage people, don't discount that feeling in your gut. It's usually right about something, right? Even something you don't even really know that much about. Did you experience that or feel that, or something either felt really good or felt really bad, and you kind of went with your gut
Yeah,
sometimes?
yeah. I definitely would encourage, people to listen to your gut. It's often right. The one thing I definitely learned, uh, and still learning today, is how to listen. So you have a gut feeling, and it's often right, but it doesn't hurt to go out there, seek advice, look, mine for dissent, so to speak. I'll talk about that in a little while, but ultimately ask a lot of questions, see if you can get different opinions, and either it reaffirms what you had thought in the beginning, or it gives you some new data point that ultimately could change your decision. And I think that's an important thing to do, is also recognize that your gut is often right, but it can be wrong, and there's nothing wrong with being wrong, and especially in admitting it sometimes. Like, yeah, I changed my mind. I got new information, and I have a better decision now.
That's great. Let's get into your leadership secrets now. Thanks for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. So the first leadership lesson is build amazing teams. This is your most important job as a leader. And it seems rather obvious at the surface level, but how one goes about doing this can be challenging. Building an amazing team starts with the hiring process. So I've been hiring people now for over, well, I guess, yeah, 20 years. Uh, and I've hired good, great, and not so great people. That is, I've hired a range of people who have excelled, who didn't end up succeeding. And it's worth noting that when I hired all of these individuals, I thought they'd all be great. And I think I have a pretty high technical bar when it comes to hiring. I've required take-home projects. I've done pair programming with candidates. I've asked the crazy trick questions that we've all asked throughout our career, designed to weed out, the people that can't think through problems and whatnot. And I believe in the 10x developer. I've hired them; they exist. In fact, I have an entire team full of them. So I feel like I can hire technically competent individuals, and I have often not hired people based on this technical bar that I've set up. But again, given that I feel like I have a reasonably good technical bar and ability to assess technical prowess, I've still had to let some of those individuals go throughout my career. And it wasn't really until I got to Netflix that I put these things together, connected the dots, and realized that how to hire effectively. Because in fact, Netflix also has a very high technical bar. In fact, I think my technical bar increased having gone to Netflix and realized kind of the talent density that this company has. But what I realized is that the technical bar, or the technical aspect of someone, is just half the process, half the hiring process. And half the process, the other half of the process at Netflix is gauging an individual's culture fit. And culture fit isn't if the candidate is someone you want to hang out with after work. Culture fit isn't about hiring someone who looks like you or has similar interests. And it's not about hiring someone that went to your alma mater. Culture fit is about trying to understand if the candidate in question can live the cultural values that your company values. Of course, that assumes your company actually has values that it values. all companies have a culture, good or bad. But companies who want to build strong teams articulate their values and stick to them. It's one thing to have fancy posters up in the hallway that espouse feel-good values like honesty and integrity, like Enron did. But really, actual company values are the behaviors and skills that are valued in your fellow employees. And so at Netflix, we seek out and hire individuals who can communicate, are innovative, passionate, practice sound judgment, are impactful, curious, have courage, are honest, are inclusive, and are selfless. It's that easy, right? The interview process at Netflix isn't ad hoc. It's a full day spent talking with various hand-picked people who are assessing technical skills as well as those specific cultural values.
Hey, Andy, question for you on that.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people, when they hear that, will go, holy cow, that's a rigorous interview process.
Yeah.
Does Netflix ever discuss, gosh, do we spend too much time? Is that too big of a burden to put people through that? Or have they ever tried to shorten it and found out that didn't work? Have you ever tried to shorten it and found out it didn't work? How do you kind of figure out how much is necessary to find those right people? What's been your experience there?
Yeah, so it definitely is arduous. So before coming to Netflix, my interview process was roughly an hour. And at Netflix, it's roughly a full day. And we do very much evaluate the process, continue to look at it with the eye of some empathy towards the interviewee. And so we create a panel, and we will structure the panel such that there are breaks. We'll also totally be empathetic with if the person's flying in from, let's say, another time zone, be cognizant that they're going to be kind of discombobulated with time zones and whatnot. So we can, if you're a local resident, we can actually break it up over 2 days. So you can think of the interview panel as two parts. The first part, or the first half, is more technical in nature. And then there's a break, usually a lunch. We'll feed you and just relax, have a good time. And then there's a second part where we're assessing cultural fit. And we try not to overload individuals with too many people. So I would say on average you'll probably meet with 6 different people. So you can think of 3 people in the morning and then 3 people in the afternoon. Again, there are interspersed breaks. And each session, if you will, like I usually aim for 45 minutes or an hour when I talk with somebody. I am usually on the second, I shouldn't say usually, I'm now always on the second half of an interview. And then on the first half, the technical interview, there could be whiteboards. Sometimes 2 people could come and chat, and it's also trying not to make it a high stress environment. And so the individuals that we handpick to interview are usually quite skilled at interviewing and good at kind of, let's say, building camaraderie with someone, getting someone to relax, because interviewing is obviously high stress. So I guess in short, Jeff, yes, we're always reevaluating the process and trying to make it less intimidating, but also recognizing that in order to get a really good read on someone, you need a lot of different people. And even then, we know it's imperfect. If it were a perfect process, then no one would ever leave Netflix, and unfortunately, that's not the case. So, does that answer your question?
Absolutely, thanks.
I think for me, the real kind of like mind shift was, again, previous to Netflix. I would interview for an hour, and maybe get a read from someone else. So maybe maximum it would be like 2 hours for somebody. Decision to bring someone onto your company, and so I was awestruck that In fact, when I interviewed for Netflix, I was a little intimidated when I got got the sheet. It was like, here's your day schedule. It was all these people. Um, but and it was stressful, but more from the standpoint of that was the stress I placed on myself. But in the end, it was actually kind of afterwards kind of fun. I learned a lot about the company because it's a two-way dialogue as well. It's not like an hour of someone grilling you. It's a conversation.
Great, thanks.
In fact, I'll go into some of this right now. So, I talked about that it's very important. So the technical bar, obviously vital in the tech industry. But what I'm getting at here is to build amazing teams, you have to assess cultural fit and you have to have actual values that you indeed value. And I brought up a number of values that Netflix finds important. And two of them right here are courage and honesty. And the trick, of course, becomes is how do you determine if someone is courageous or is honest? And there's obviously a variety of questions that can shed light on these traits, but one that I like to ask individuals is, tell me about a time you disagreed with your boss. What was it about, and how did you resolve the disagreement? And I think a conversation around this can give a pretty good indication if someone's courageous. Because, for example, at Netflix, we want everyone to have autonomy and speak up. Me as a leader, if I say something that is wrong, I want people to challenge me. So we all want courageous individuals that'll speak up and say, no, I think you're wrong. You're missing something. Here's more data to inform you. Honesty is also a great one. How do you assess if someone's honest? I have two different questions I ask. The first one is, tell me what you do that annoys people. I think an honest, humble, non-arrogant person should be able to give you a couple of answers. Every one of us do things that most likely annoys other people. At a minimum, our plus one, so to speak. Another one I like to ask is, if I were to ask everyone you've ever worked with before, what percentage of them would say they do not want to work with you again? And then what adjectives would they use to describe you? I can tell you that the maybe arrogant, non-humble, non-honest person will tell you nobody. Or the adjectives they use will be positive adjectives that are designed to make them look good. And so what I'm looking for is, can you tell me about a time you really had a problem with somebody or they had a problem with you and you didn't figure it out? All of us, I'm pretty sure, have worked with somebody that we just couldn't get along with, did something to upset them. And that's what I'm looking for is, can we talk through this, and what did you ultimately learn from that experience? So once someone has passed, your bar and you've hired them, unfortunately, your job isn't over. In fact, it's just starting. Every company says its employees are the best. And what Netflix does differently is that we place a firm belief in that, quote, adequate performance gets a generous severance package, end quote. That is, we don't settle for average, we seek excellence. And you can think of that as like a professional sports team in many ways. And you, as the coach, it's up to you to ensure that every player on the field is amazing at their position and that every player plays effectively with the other players. And so at Netflix, we model ourselves on being a team and not a family, because family is about unconditional love despite, say, your sibling's bad behavior. A team is about pushing yourself to be the best teammate you can be, caring intensely about your teammates, and knowing that you may not be on the team forever. And so we have this notion called the keeper test. And it's quite easy. If someone, it's something that you as a leader or a people manager need to consider from time to time. And it goes like this. If a team member comes to you and says they're leaving Netflix for another company, you have to ask yourself is, would you fight to keep them? And if the answer is no, then they don't pass your keeper test. And you as a leader need to do the right thing and promptly and respectfully give that individual a generous severance package so that we can find someone in that position that makes the team even better. And then the other thing that we believe strongly at Netflix is to never, ever tolerate brilliant jerks. The cost to team morale, communication, and collaboration is quite high. Sadly, I have hired a few brilliant jerks in my career, and I have learned firsthand that while they are indeed brilliant and can build software applications faster, faster than the 10x developer, they're like the 20 or 30x developer. Ultimately, the cost to collaboration and communication is just is obviously quite high and quite damaging. And so building amazing teams means you as a leader and encourage open and honest feedback. In order to have open and honest feedback, you've got to build mutual trust. And that means being vulnerable with your teammates. It means admitting when you're wrong and that you don't always have the answer. And it also means being humble, going back to those earlier questions that I asked candidates. This is also what is known as psychological safety. And so you have to build that as a leader in order to have an amazing team. And then you always, as a leader with your amazing team, need to think about building a bench. That is, who are the people on your team that can replace you? Who are your lieutenants? And if you don't have that, you need to start figuring that out. And so I've learned a tremendous amount from my experience at Netflix, as well as those from previous companies. And I feel strongly that your number one job as a leader is to build an amazing team who can accomplish amazing feats. And no matter what business you're in, you can't be successful if you don't have the right people in the right positions. And if you don't have the right people, you will have to make some difficult choices. And that is another aspect of being a leader that I discovered some time ago, is that it can often be a very lonely position in that you are responsible for these difficult decisions.
Hey, Andy, quick question for you on that.
Yeah.
Where does training and education fit in at Netflix? How do you all grow skills, whether they're technical skills, soft skills, management, leadership skills? Do you all do that formally? Is it more informal? Is it mentor coach? What's the model that you all use that you think works?
Well, it's yes to all of the above. So there are
That's good, right?
Formal leadership training, formal coaching, and there's a formal mentorship program. There is technical training. In fact, we push those decisions down. So as an engineer, if you want to get smart on the new technology, you are free to either take a course, expense it, or you can work with your team and say, hey, why don't we bring in an instructor and let's all learn together. And then invariably there are, ultimately other learning opportunities. So it's all the above. One thing that I want to stress that I mentioned earlier about, you are in charge of your own destiny, and Netflix very much feels very similarly in that there are certain training programs that we make available as a corporation. And it's up to you whether or not you go to them. But we also make it very clear that if you feel it's important to go out on your own, to go take a class, to bring, again, an instructor to Netflix to teach a large audience, you are free to do that. And I like that model. So I've done all the above. And in fact, as a leader, I also go once a year to a whole week-long leadership seminar run by Netflix. It's fascinating. So yeah, all the above.
Awesome, thanks.
So my second leadership lesson is, and actually this is a good segue, is to treat the people you hire like adults. It turns out if you hire well and build amazing teams staffed with truly stunning people, you don't need a lot of rules. Demand that people will do the right thing, and 99.999 times out of 1,000, they will do the right thing. Case in point with respect to training, we don't have a training budget per se. You are free to do what you think is effective for your career in the company. So if you want to go to a conference, go to it. There's no, again, limit to how much you can quote unquote spend with respect to enhancing or training your skill set. And so at Netflix, we call it freedom and responsibility. Employees are given unprecedented freedom to make decisions, but they're held accountable to them. So going back to training, you can do as much training as you want, but you are also ultimately accountable for that. And so ostensibly, hopefully you're becoming a better employee or a more skilled employee, and it's worth that investment. And if you aren't, then there are consequences, right? So for example, we do not have a vacation policy. Employees take as much vacation as they'd like. And our expense policy is super simple. In fact, it's 5 words: act in Netflix's best interest. When I submit my expenses, there's no approval process, and I do not have to approve anyone on my team's expenses. Nevertheless, accidents happen, people will make mistakes, and these are opportunities to learn. In fact, as a company, we accept mistakes. We purposely avoid putting up gates to avoid mistakes. We move fast and sometimes break things, but we quickly learn. For example, there are no annual performance reviews. We don't compete with one another. We pay top of market. Your economic security is based upon your skills and your reputation. So if you have an amazing team, your job as a leader isn't about control, it's all about context. As a leader, your job is to point out which mountain needs climbing, and if you've hired and built an amazing team, they'll figure out the best way to scale it. So we pride ourselves on how few, not how many decisions senior management makes. And if a person does do something dumb, rather than blame that person, instead, what you should ask yourself is what context you failed to provide. And that was somewhat new for me because before I joined Netflix, I was very much a command and control type of person. I didn't trust everyone, and I made far too many decisions that could have been made by much more effective people. So my job as a leader now is to ensure I'm providing as much context as possible so that my team can make the right choices. Because if they don't, I won't be successful. Okay, so now you've built an amazing team. They're all firing on all cylinders with a high degree of autonomy, and you're ready to take on the world. There's at least one more lesson that I'd like to share, and it's top of mind because I often have to share it with my team. In fact, I shared it with them recently. Something I'm continually reminded of in pretty much every major initiative I found myself involved in throughout my career is this: people want to buy, they don't want to be sold to. So if you find yourself in a sales mode for some idea, concept, or even a product, take a step back and reframe the benefits so that people buy whatever it is you're selling. If it sounds simple, that's because it is. Any successful salesperson has mastered this art. And you can see this, concept in action day in and day out. Classic example is I'm not an Apple iWatch person, but I see a lot of them around. I mean, do you really need to read your email on your watch? Apple made an amazing product that compelled people to buy it. They don't have to sell per se or convince you to have this thing on your wrist. And so it really comes down to the difference between need and want. And many applications, for example, need testing, but developers want to spend their time on new features. And so your job as a leader, and almost always as a leader, you are in transformation scenarios, is you want people to be in the want side of the equation. Even though they may need it, they won't do it. But if they want it, they'll go for it. And as part of this, we have this notion at Netflix, which we call Mind for Dissent, which I mentioned earlier. And the idea is that as a leader, you need to find out who dissents for it. Get to know as fast as possible and understand why. Because once you do, chances are you can reframe things or fix your messaging or your product or your idea so as to address those concerns, and people will then switch into that buying mode. And this gets to the heart of any transformation or major initiative that introduces change, because as we all know, people love change. I've experienced this countless times through my career, whether it be at Netflix or even in my consulting days, or even at IBM, is that in order to get people to change, they need to want to change. You can't tell people to change, and so you've got to actually get people to understand the rationale in terms of they may need this, but you're going to want to make them want it, so to speak. And so I've seen countless great ideas go nowhere, and innovative products and solutions die on the vine, all because of the belief that if you build it, they will come. And ultimately, these are failures. They're the embodiment of solutions looking for a problem. Present your ideas, your products, your transformations as beliefs so people will buy them. And if you can't, move on quickly to the next one. And so present them as like a benefit, and then people will buy. So, being mindful of time, I hope I've imparted something of value to most of you this morning/afternoon. I do want to stress I'm still learning. I know, for example, that if I find myself no longer learning and confident, I know, and then if I feel I know everything, I'm wrong. So that's something that I continually kind of ask myself, is if I find myself in a position where I'm not learning, it's probably an opportunity for me to move on, so to speak. So remember, your job as a leader is to build amazing teams, treat the people on your teams like adults because they'll do amazing things, and stop trying to sell so much.
Cool stuff, Andy. Question for you.
Yes, sir.
So what do you feel you need to work on or improve leadership-wise? What's the thing that you still think you're trying to get better at, either in these lessons, one that you don't feel you've mastered yet, or something else? I mean, what are you personally working on?
Yeah.
I'm curious. I think the audience would love to hear that.
It's a huge list, so I'll try to narrow it down in the time we have. One thing that
we are planning to take questions. So
one thing I am working on is how basically the context over control, and recognizing that as my position in the company, or as my scope has grown in the company, my words, they really matter. And so I have to be careful in terms of, I don't necessarily want to, or I should say, context over control is nuanced in the sense of, if I voice an opinion, I may be voicing an opinion with the mindset of, I'm just seeing if this sticks on the wall, so to speak. But it could be interpreted as a strong opinion or an edict. And understanding kind of the nuances of communication and how people receive what you're saying is a fine art. I'm still learning it, and sometimes I overstep, and I will say something or voice an opinion that I probably should have just instead asked a question or kept digging. And so leadership's hard. Effective leadership is hard. And so I'm constantly working on that, in the sense of I have strong opinions about a number of things, for example, that I helped build at Netflix, and I have to let go of that and recognize that there are actually much better people, more skilled people, more qualified people that can take over those things, for example, that I built or that I played a hand in building. And letting go is hard. So again, that's another thing I'm working on is like how can you just basically let go? I told you I was a command and control type of person. I still sometimes struggle with it.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. You never said it during the webinar, but the concept of servant leadership is clearly a Netflix philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Thinking of Agile and DevOps and the idea that, our role as a leader isn't to tell people what to do, it's to set the vision and give them, you said it, the what mountain are we going toward, and then enabling your teams through finding those people, treating them properly, and identifying the people who maybe don't want to go where you want to go and getting them on board is really the role of a good leader in today's world, right?
Yeah, yeah, and another thing that I'm constantly learning is conveying ideas effectively, right? Just because you say something and someone nods or asks a few questions doesn't necessarily mean they truly understood what you were trying to get across. And so learning how to ask questions and invoke kind of a dialogue with your team is really important because it brings out kind of like alignment issues. And that's again a fine art, of leadership in terms of as a leader, what you're ultimately trying to do is set the stage. There's the mountain to go climb, and then you want the team to figure out the routes to get there. But sometimes that analogy breaks down because mountains are really easy to point out, like it's right there. But imagine you're in like, let's say, a big mountain range, and there's a bunch of mountains that are all the same height, and ensuring that everyone's pointing at the same one is actually is subtle, and it's important to ask lots of questions and draw out kind of like people's thoughts and kind of what they're thinking, and invariably you learn something new from doing that. And I'm still learning how to do that.
Great. We are going to take questions in a minute. So please, if you have a question for Andy or myself, put it in the chat. We'll buzz down through them with the time we have remaining. I do want to make you all aware of a few things, though, before we get to questions. First is kind of curious where the audience stands in terms of DevOps and kind of where you're at in the process. So I want to open a poll really quick to ask, where are you at? Do you feel like you're at an elite level? Are you just getting started? Is just DevOps, I say it's a slogan, so it's something you're talking about, and but you're not really doing. Where are you at in the process? And while they're doing that, Andy, obviously Netflix, Netflix is known as a DevOps oriented organization, a company that does continuous deployment of capability, is known for that. Case studies have been written about it. You're obviously intimately involved in it. Kind of what's your view of the DevOps or the Netflix approach to DevOps, if you will?
Well, certainly it's all about moving fast, so to speak, fast with a high degree of confidence, security, reliability. We also, from a, let's say, like a DevOps posture, we don't have a DevOps team per se. In fact, those kind of, let's say, mindset and skills are embedded in teams. So every team at Netflix controls their own destiny, so to speak. That is, you are, cradle to grave, so to speak. There's no ops team you throw your app over to. It's you as a developer hold the pager, and if your app doesn't work in production, let's say at 3 a.m., you're the one that gets the page, not some ops team that triages it and whatnot.
Yeah, that keeps you honest too, right? I know Amazon uses that approach, right? Which is the cradle to grave. One way to make sure something is high quality, or we'll call it, market quality, is that you're the one that gets the call when it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, no, it really does instill a level of quality in apps because I mean, none of us wants to get a page at 3 a.m. And
Exactly.
then going back to like, accepting accidents will happen. We have a blameless post-mortem culture. So, things break. In fact, we accept that. In fact, we actually optimize on finding and resolving errors rather than prohibiting errors. Uh, and I should say optimize the time, shortening the time, right? And uh, and then afterwards, we do this weekly. We hold postmortems in an effort to figure out like what did we learn, and then we will the lessons that we've learned, if we can codify them in some sort of automation, we will put them in the automation, so to speak. And so rarely, uh, in fact, I won't say never. I'll say very rarely does Netflix fail. Let's say the architecture that supports Netflix fail in the same way twice.
Yeah, no, that's great. You look at the results of the poll, so it looks like most of the audience is either DevOps is a work in progress for them, so they've obviously been working on it for a while, or they're just getting started with DevOps. There's a few that feel like they're pretty mature, and there's a few that really feel like they're just getting, it's really only something that's talked about. Kind of looks like your classic bell curve. For a small set of people, obviously, but your kind of standard bell curve there in terms of where people are at. Thanks everybody for doing that. All right, a couple of things, and then we'll get into your questions. I see questions are coming. If you're interested in learning more about DevOps, about leadership in DevOps and Agile, we do have some upcoming activities and events. So Andy spoke at our last Agile Leadership Summit, which we held last November in Orlando. And that's a day-long summit for anybody who's interested in exploring these kinds of topics. We typically have a couple of speakers who talk. Andy gave a version of this presentation, actually a little longer. Got rave reviews as it did today. And we run those at our Agile DevOps leadership, or our Agile DevOps conferences at the end of each of those conferences. Our next one is coming up on June 12th. It's our Agile DevOps West event. We have a 2-day leadership workshop. It's a 2-day training class that's focused around, from an Agile or DevOps perspective, how do you lead transformations? How do you lead change? How do you go about being a leader in those kinds of activities in your organization? We're giving that training class as well in June. And we also have a Quality Leadership Summit associated with our Star East event. One note is we recently switched these to be virtual events for this spring because none of us are going nowhere, as far as I can tell, for who knows how long with our friend coronavirus. I will note that it's apropos that we're doing something on leadership here today, given the current situation out there, right? This is the time for people to step up as leaders, right? I mean, there are so many companies right now scrambling around, trying to get their ducks in a row. People are distracted, people are nervous, people are scared. This is the time when leadership has to shine. If you want to, get your company going forward again, you need to step up and take charge of that process and help the people in your organization get themselves refocused on moving forward successfully and making sure that you're obviously protecting everyone in the organization as well. So, look at this as a good opportunity from a leadership perspective to help your organization. We've got some upcoming classes as well, some virtual classes that are happening. I'll also encourage you to join the Hub. So the Hub is a Slack-based community of software professionals. We started it about 1.5 years ago or so. It has almost 5,000 members. It's free. You can sign up at hub.techwell.com. I'm actually going to go over and be in the DevOps channel after this to answer any questions we can't get to today before this webinar ends. I don't know if Andy's going to be able to join or not, but if you are a member or you want to sign up, it's free. Just go to hub.techwell.com And I'll be in the DevOps channel talking to people about DevOps and leadership after this. I do want to mention before we take questions that our next webinar is on May 28th. It's called Test Design for CI/CD. Don't know how many of you have heard Melissa Benoit speak on this subject. She is an expert on crafting tests and designing tests to integrate into your CI/CD process. And we're going to get geeky and talk tech and talk test and talk CI/CD with Melissa on May 28th. So please sign up for that if you're interested in that topic. So with that, we'll take questions. Alexa, do you have any questions teed up for us?
Yes. Owen has a question. I love the idea of unlimited employee-driven training. However, what about for companies that literally can't afford that? How can they promote learning opportunities when budgets are tighter than Netflix's budget?
Great question. I would encourage things like this. There's plenty of webinars and amazing content out there. I wouldn't say Netflix has an unlimited budget. We certainly, we do. Well, we won't go there. But I think there's plenty of free or low cost training options. And as I think Jeff was alluding to, I suspect over the coming weeks as an industry, we'll get a lot better at this since we're pretty much all forced to work from home. So it'll be fascinating to see where this goes. But
yeah, I would add that you should take an agile approach to it. Try to find the training that you think is valuable to your team. I would get your team possibly engaged and involved in discussing it, and use it as part of a retro maybe on things that you think you should improve on, and then prioritize it, and based on budget you have, start at the top and kind of march down it, right? I mean, make it a prioritization exercise.
Yeah.
Since you can't afford to obviously do everything.
Okay, our next question is from Stephen. We are not aligned as a true end-to-end DevOps team. We have pieces, but ops teams still separate, for example. How do you convince organizations to move in the direction Netflix has?
Yeah, so it's a long answer that I would love to give. It's an entire presentation in terms of how Netflix got to where we are. We had the benefit of kind of a do or die transformation we had to go through a number of years ago. But ultimately, I would say that the how do you convince organizations to move in this direction is it comes down to speed and agility, as Jeff has alluded to. If every company, that is the last differentiator that any company has, in this day and age. And if you are not a fast, or if you do not have the ability to move fast and learn, you will be beat by someone who is moving faster or is able to learn more. So I think it just, how do you convince corporations to do this? Look around in your domain and find the company that's beating your company, and I suspect they're practicing, or they're putting into place many of the things that Netflix and other companies have done. Just look at Google, Facebook, Amazon, LinkedIn, Microsoft. So I would start there. I recognize change is really, really hard. Transformations don't happen overnight. And like I said, Netflix was forced to do this. Came out the other side, obviously successful, and not every company would have come out successful.
And so part of Christian's
I would add
related
just
to
add real quick.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add, I would add real quick. I'm a big fan of the metrics that Gene Kim collects in his State of the DevOps report that's done every year. And I mean, what I think is most valuable there is being able to take that information to management and saying, here's where the world is. And oh, by the way, I did some quick calculations. And if you're not, ops isn't working with anybody else, it's going to be some pretty easy calculations, I can tell you, as to where we are, right? And then here's what the industry is seeing benefit-wise. What are you getting in terms of quality and speed to market, from the people that are doing DevOps right, and to do it, obviously, in a way that's productive. You have to get everybody in the entire supply chain working together. I've been successful talking to companies about metrics and data, benchmarking really, where are we at versus where are others at, and are we keeping up, right? Because that's something that, leadership in your organization has to care about.
The and another author, I forgot her name, published a book. It was in the last 2 years called Accelerate, and that's a
It was
really
Nicole, right?
yes, Nicole, yeah.
Fourth grade? Yeah.
Really good book. And because one thing I often hear is, oh, well, we're not Netflix. We can't do it. We weren't born in the cloud, whatnot. And I think Accelerate does a great job of elaborating kind of like how government and other industries are essentially succeeding in doing these transformations.
Okay, and a question from Christian. When you were adopting the DevOps methodology, what were the main issues you ran into and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so there's some good publications and podcasts out there. I would encourage you to look into this. Look for stuff about Reed Hastings, he's the CEO. But ultimately, the main issue is we had to transform from a DVD company to a streaming company. As many of you well know, the DVD business is still out there. It's maybe some of you still receive DVDs. But they are now two separate companies. We're both Netflix, but they're operated differently. And so the company basically had to bifurcate itself and go towards the streaming model, which was going to be cloud-based and completely different. And it was really, really difficult. And so essentially the old style of thinking stayed. And I shouldn't say old style. I mean, it's a successful line of business, but it stayed. So some people moved to DVD. And then fewer people, high risk, went to this idea of, can we build a streaming business? And it was predominantly developers, and developers had very strong opinions on how to move fast and what they didn't want to see in this future world. And so that ultimately was the main issue, was essentially splitting the company in two, and it was super high risk, fraught with danger. And miraculously, Netflix came out the other side, but it was just as likely as Netflix would have collapsed. So that's the Netflix story. And again, you can find this story. I would encourage you to read it. And I think that's the heart of the answer, or gets to the heart of your question.
We have a question from Philip. With the level of delegation you have given to your team, what sort of metric do you use to see if they are performing as you expect?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's the currency at Netflix is like delivery, right? So as a team, you put out a roadmap and you say, here's what we're going to deliver. We usually do it on a quarterly basis, and so the metric is are you living up to your promises? I work in I work in a centralized team where ultimately our end users are other developers at Netflix. So we, as an organization, make promises to them in terms of here's where these products are going, here's where they're going to be. Obviously, they can shift based on business priorities, but the metric just comes back to are you delivering what you say you will? And of course, timelines slip, things happen, and the secondary metric is are you a good partner? Do your stakeholders understand why you slipped, and is there agreement that for whatever reason you made this promise but you didn't keep it, type thing?
I'm assuming communication and constant communication is a big part of that, Andy.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't even mention
making sure that you're in sync. You're not surprising them, right? If they're being surprised, they're probably not happy stakeholders.
Exactly. Yeah. Some of these things are table stakes, so I shouldn't assume. But yeah, no. Underneath all of that is like, are you a great partner? Do you communicate? Do you set expectations well? All of that it goes into ultimately like, do you deliver value to are you providing leverage? That's another metric that we look for.
Okay, one last question, and I think it's a common scenario. Mike says, if I know we need DevOps and the development team knows we need DevOps, but the entirety of the rest of the organization doesn't care to give you the time to do it, is shadow IT the solution? Everyone's most valuable resource is time, but it's hard to demonstrate the benefits of DevOps if you're not given the time to do it.
Yeah, I'd actually be I'd be curious to hear your answer here, Jeff. But the proof is in the pudding. We used to, I have consulted for large companies. I used to work at IBM, and in many cases, what you had to do is go off on a side thread and solve a problem, so to speak. Low risk, but risky enough where if you solved it, you could show it to a business leader and say, hey, here's what we did. Doesn't this make sense? Look at the improvements, whatever, the time to, value, whatever. I guess that's the way you'd have to do it in this scenario, in the sense of because the rest of the business doesn't care, you're going to have to show them in some way. And obviously the fine line is, can you run an experiment that it's okay if you fail? Obviously don't shoot for the moon, but also shoot for something that's meaningful enough to actually make people raise their eyebrows.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track, and you're on the right track, Mike. I mean, shadow IT sometimes is necessary to get your point across. One thing I love and I always say about DevOps is it's very demoable, right? And really, we're talking CI/CD. We're talking the automation piece of it, right? We're not talking the collaboration, communication, everybody working together. But if you can show and demonstrate capability and tie that to business value, like what's the value our customers are getting, or are the rest of the organization would see by doing this? Sometimes you got to shadow IT it. We had a large company that, they wanted to go through and tried to go through corporate IT to stand up some servers and get some infrastructure so they could do a pilot project around Agile and DevOps. And IT told them that it would probably take maybe 6 months to get those environments ready. And we're like, well, the pilot's only 6 months long, so that's kind of not going to work. And in the end, the business owner, the stakeholder said, you know what, screw it. We're going to just stand up some stuff in AWS. We're not going to use anything that's, proprietary in terms of customer data or anything. We're gonna do this pilot outside of IT, and then we're going to take it to the business and show them the value. And that turned out to be a pretty good way to actually get the rest of the organization to engage. Well, it looks like we're past out of time. Thanks for a lot of people for sticking around. Thank you very much. I don't think we have an audience poll this time, but please, let us know if there are topics specific to Agile, to DevOps, to leadership, to testing, to security that you're interested in for the webinar series. We try to cover various topics, bring in various guests with different perspectives, and we're always open to feedback and ideas about upcoming webinars that we could hold. So with that, I want to thank Andy for joining us. Thanks for taking the time, Andy. I know you're really busy, and really appreciate all your comments. It was fantastic, and I'm sure the audience got a lot out of it.
This was fun.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
for anybody that's
Andy.
interested, we'll be over in the hub thereafter.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Jeff. And thank everyone for joining us today. Hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alexa.